I'm Dane Rose, and when doing art for therapy, there are a couple of different stages and a couple of different paradigms within which to work. I want to mention that I'll be interrupting this to speak with a client shortly, hence the headset. But as we look at the paradigm of art for healing and art in a medicinal sense, the first thing is to discover the topic that needs work. Now, the topic that needs work is the topic that is most bottled up. Meaning if it was not bottled up, it does not need work. Things that are flowing. You don't really need to worry about a breath cycle unless it is stuck. Then you need to know if it's stuck on the inhale or the outhale, the exhale. You have to have a sense of where the system is clogged up before you can get it going again. Now, in mental emotional health, the clogged up point are the moments that you don't want to be in your body, are the things that you don't want to feel, are the things that you don't want to acknowledge and be conscious of and or think. Meaning these things are in the reality, they are in the field. You have your little ego bubble that says this is me and this is not me. And the ego has received a message from the culture. Your needs will not be met if you think like this, if you feel like this, if you do this, if you engage in your body like this. Now, sick cultures give sick dictates to their citizens. And the crisis of health comes when a culture says, if you speak this truth in this way, you will be banished. And then the energy system created by that, let's look at a bind here. So if you are angry, you are a bad person. Well, this should make any healthy person angry, because anger is the emotion in the psychic field that we experience when who we are is blocked from going into part of our own psychic domain. This is the equivalent of a U.S. Marshal coming up to you at your address and saying, we will put you in prison if you go into this room of your own house. Well, the blustering outrage of the typical American around property rights and materialistic rights is such that this would be an outrage. And yet, when the same U.S. Marshal drives up and says anyone who's angry is not going to be given any respect, is going to be banished from the culture and thus imprisoned in isolation and shame, arguably a more intense prison than being stuck in a concrete cell, we think nothing of it. But the healthy part of the psyche says, no, this is wrong. A bicyclist that is told, this spoke can touch the ground, this spoke can touch the ground, this spoke can touch the ground, but this one cannot, is going to say, well, how can I ride my bike when the circle of life that goes around inevitably gets to this point on the wheel? This is not scientific. The wheel cannot turn unless every spoke in the wheel is allowed to make contact. Now, what are the parts of the wheel that hold the culturally sanctioned, positive, chirrupy, smiley face, everything's cool, everything's fine, I don't have any emotions, I'm good, I don't need anything, I don't need anyone. What are the spokes on the wheel that hold that delusion in place? It is the exact opposite. Deep need, tremendous trauma, emotional intensity. The wheel is held in place by paradox and opposition. The spoke that is going 180 degrees away from this spoke that is culturally sanctioned is what keeps the rim of the wheel circular. If there are no spokes over there, because they're all banished, the wheel goes flat. Now the culturally sanctioned parts of the psyche cannot move either, because there's a flat tire. The circle of life is the circle of emotions, is the circle of sleep and wakefulness, is the circle of male and female, masculine and feminine, is the circle of birth, expansion, contraction, and death, is the circle of failure and success, is the circle of leading and following, of listening and speaking, of being in the unknown, leading to knowledge, knowledge leading to the unknown and the vast majority of life that we do not know. So this is the paradigm. So what we're looking for in any healing is the stuck place. Now what we are diagnosing is not the individual, it is the culture. Meaning if someone is stuck, meaning they come to their shame and they freeze, or they come to their shame and they run like hell, or they come to their shame and they start fighting and making sure that they never feel anything about this shame. This is a direct indictment of the environment in which they have been raised, which has told them in no uncertain terms, you will die if you go into this domain of yourself. So what we're discovering with these stuck points is nothing eternal about the self, is nothing eternal about the psyche, is nothing objectively good or bad about anything. What we are discovering is the point in the flow of life and evolution at which someone has jammed a crowbar in the spike and spokes of your bicycle such that it cannot turn and you have a visceral reaction from memory that says this isn't going to work because it's never worked before, because I'm surrounded by people who will jab a crowbar into my system to make sure that I don't go into this psychic terrain, so that through the mirror neurons of my influence, they do not go into this psychic domain, so that the status quo of a faulty system that is protected by everyone refusing to look at this arena of reality can stay comfortable, rather than face the unknown, which to a traumatized individual and to a traumatized culture is the horror of horrors. This is what we can diagnose. So here we have paints, and I don't know what to do. Meaning, I don't want to be in my body in this terrain. When I look, it has to do with grief, helplessness, hurt, and I don't want to be here. When I go into this terrain, my eyes go down. How can I paint if my eyes go down? What I'm saying here is that I am in a domain in my psyche where when I look at this, I am carrying the shame of the inadequacy of my culture. Meaning when I brought this part to this mom and this father and these siblings and these teachers and these therapists and these friends and these publics and these clients and these Americans, when I brought this part of myself to them, They turned away. Unanimously. Turned away. And said, that part of you is not worth fighting for. That part of you is not worth looking at. That part of you is not worth validating. That part makes all of us uncomfortable. We want that part to go away. And the trauma and the grief of a little boy who needed love and belonging, the third level of human need that every human needs in Maslow's hierarchy of needs, survival, security, love, and belonging, said, this part of me cannot be loved around here. This part of me is so threatening to the idiots that surround me that if I don't disown this part and put it outside of me, none of me is going to survive, feel secure, and feel love and belonging. So I don't know what you did wrong, but you are bad, and I'm going to put you outside of me. Now we go up. We feel the ache, the emptiness of a hole that no amount of alcohol, that no amount of sex and power and money can fill. And the culture says, oh, that's fine, just get another degree. That's fine, just, you've become a millionaire? Become a billionaire. That's fine. Have an affair. We won't tell anyone. Here, have a little money on us. Just don't rock the boat. The ego comes back again with more lies. The culture is the ego that protects the individual from the vast majority of reality that is outside of the cult. The culture is the ego, the envelope that protects the individual from the vast majority of the unknown, 99.9% to be precise, that is outside of the cultural framework. It protects us from that unknown. And we give ourselves sacrificing the shadow. The shadow is everything that does not fit into the cultural box. The shadow is everything beautiful, divine, and magnificent that this culture doesn't know what to do with. The culture is everything ugly, everything unpalatable, everything that is a little bit too messy, too specific, too unique, too complex for an ignorant, bumbling ego of a culture to know what to do with. I don't know what to do with this kind of human being. And I can never admit that I don't know what I'm doing. So first we'll marginalize and hide you, and if you speak up, we'll punish you, and if you still speak up, we'll blame you and we'll demonize you. But the rule of the ego, be it the ego in here or the ego in Washington or the ego in any culture, is never admit you're wrong, never admit you don't know, never accept what's outside the box, and lie and cheat and punish and rape and terrorize every part of the citizenry, every part of the group that goes up to the edge. Edward Snowden tells the truth about the power structure, banished to Russia. WikiLeaks tells the truth about the power structure, demonized, and let's rewrite the entire Constitution of the United States so that we can now call a media organization an intelligence organization, so that we can prosecute them and bully every country around on the planet to attack one man who simply has an untainted record for calling the bullshit of power structures. And since the biggest power structure in the world today on a political level is the United States, on a political and military level, the United States is the biggest ego. on the planet today. WikiLeaks primarily deals with the abuses of power of the United States, which makes Julian Assange an illegal captive in a London embassy of a small country, one of the few in the world able and willing to sanction and honor human dignity. So this is the role of culture. Now, for this huge price of denying the most beautiful and the most complex parts of who every human being is, the individuals get one thing. You can be asleep. You can expect regular activities that are not surprising. You will not be faced with the unknown that could lead you back into the trauma of our abuse. You can be certain that certain things will always be the same. Now, it may not be true, but we will lie to you. And we will put you back to sleep again. You don't need to worry about it. We will go out and bully the rest of the world and lie and do this and that and the other, and you can be asleep. And you don't have to take responsibility for yourself. Erich Fromm, writing about Nazis and the German people's great relief that Hitler had a plan and all they had to do was follow it. The 29% of registered Republicans today are greatly relieved that Donald Trump, with a 80-90% popularity rating, even as he is statistically shown to have lied more than 16,000 times to date, with the current ratio being 16 lies a day if we look at the traditional version of reality versus Donald Trump's version of reality. And he is moving people slowly away from the idea that you can trust anyone else but him. And there is a happy demographic of free-thinking Americans who just listen and will do whatever he says based on his version of reality. This is a state of beautiful demonstration of some of the blocks in our culture. And so what I'm seeing here is that I'm in that domain that has never been welcomed, that has never been honored, that has never been loved. And as I bring this part of me back, the last time I was in this domain, I was a scared 6-year-old child. And I knew that I would be killed if I brought these things into view. I knew people were scared of this domain. And I knew that if I could just play the delinquent role, if I could pretend that the mistakes of my culture were my own, if I could pretend and make my parents comfortable, I'd be a good little boy. And that's what we get for all this sacrifice, for all this abomination. You are a good little boy, and we will tolerate you as long as you do not go in this room, or this room, or this room of your own mind. We will tolerate you as long as you do not step beyond the threshold that we can control you, because that's the contract. You give our power to us, and we'll keep you safe from the unknown, regardless of whether it is a beautiful unknown or a horrific unknown, regardless of if there is much to learn from there or very little. We'll give you the freedom to have a little box and devote your 60 hours a week to driving around mindlessly, listening to mindless media. As you do mindless activity that erodes your planetary ecology, and you can choose which brand of potato chip to eat. And you can choose which team of men banging into each other and injuring each other. And you can choose which lying political party. And you can choose which genetically modified soybean or corn you want to eat. And then you can sit down in your drugged body and watch the adrenaline fix called news, which we engineer to spike levels of medium brain arousal. It's all we can get these days. With violence, blood, and sex, and then quickly follow that traumatizing moment with an advertisement for pornography, a lovely woman who doesn't exist, to sell you something you don't need, and tell you once again it's wonderful, everything will be fine, just press buy with one click, and you're almost there, the American dream. And when you go mad, wrestling in the old people's home where we will banish you from view, to be humiliated and abused by underpaid, chauvinistic, emotionally illiterate marginals who couldn't get a better job on Wall Street than taking care of the unwanted demographic. When they wrestle with the anger and the unspoken words that try to come out, we will redouble our effort to build the scientific wall based on the lie that there is nothing meaningful about any of this, including human consciousness, and that enough drugs will surely solve the problem caused by our cultural disease. So this is the domain that we're in. And the question is, how old am I? I'm around 6, maybe 7, when I brought this gold, tentatively with grief, because it was not asked for, because it was not seen, because it was not honored, because everyone pretended it wasn't even there. When I brought this domain, what is a fucking doorway? When I brought this domain through the doorway and through the forbidden door, when I peered out beyond the edges of my already initial formations of mental and emotional insanity and stood here, geometric, asking, will you see the person you put behind those doors? Will you look at the truth you do not want to see? Will you look in the shadows you have asked me to stay in? When you look here, will you stop blaming me for the one you cursed into silence? Will you stop hurting the grief you will not heal? Ah! Ah! So we're in the domain. We're in the domain beyond language. This part was never invited in to the sophisticated vocabulary of our lies. So it has no words. It has no words because it has been denied a voice. It is unregulated because when you're put in the dark and lied to and punished before you know what's going on, you have no method, no tool to learn the regulation skills that allow you to relate this part of your stabbed and deformed psyche with other people whose greatest fear is going into this domain within their own psyche and discovering the deformed cripple that has been enslaved at birth, represented by the slave labor of children and women in unsafe garment factories around the world who are dying. So that the elite power structure that is out here in the golden area of civilized society can look better at their expense. The $6,000 luxury item that's reduced to $199 with slave labor and is such a find is the bribe for keeping her in hell. And the thought structure that says, oh no, every culture needs to go through slavery, child labor, rape in its healthy economic growth. We're giving them options and jobs. Is the logic that puts our conscience to sleep. The conscience that would never buy the idea that having another hat at a greatly discounted price is worth a mother not being able to feed her baby, when a little bit more and a little kindness would let her speak, come out of the doorway of shame and imprisonment, and be honored. This is the domain that we're in right now. And why am I so sick at 43? Is it maybe that I have gone to bed with my abuser in the cozy sheets of rationality, the soft undulating curves of sadism, masochism, and self-loathing? Have I ended up too deep to see my way out? And in the darkness where I put myself to make you comfortable. And the smile that I cover the wound with so you don't have to look. Is that what we're dealing with in this domain? Is that the level of anger, fear, and hatred that a 5-year-old boy did not know how to handle and hid in the skirts of his abuser, begging her, please don't make me see. What do I have to do to make you comfortable, Mom? You, that beauty queen who knows your children are not as valuable as the pertness of your breasts, as the style of your makeup, as the fact that in this culture you are given the ultimate compliment that you still look like a teenager and live your life in an adolescent culture which does not know how to take responsibility for your soul. Because we've got to whitewash the door. Bury it. Might have done the trick. Just looks murky now. We can't see anything, right? So why bother? Why go in there and look for the one lost in the prison of our lives to make our abusers more comfortable? Why trouble the sleeping waif that never has enough food? While we gluttonously fill our bodies with one sugar high after the next to avoid the uneasy feeling that there's something wrong, that there's something we don't want to look at. Why? And the hatred, it's all at that little girl in there, isn't it? The little girl that actually thought she could be loved for who she was, for her presence, for her radiance, her resonance. The little girl. The only innocent one of the bunch. Each of you will have your own language. Some of you may not find the terrain that you need to enter until you start moving and leaving the frame. It can be dance, it can be sounds, it can be weeping. It can be different yoga poses until you find the thread. But there is value in the synesthesia of moving a sound into an image into a sound and an image into words that can hold the wound you are trying to bring into the light. The psyche is not sick, our relationship with it is. The soul is not sick, our relationship with it is. God and Goddess have never left. Our relationship with that sacred wheel, outside the boundaries of our cult is sick, is weak, and greedy for power. Too many in the roles of priest and priestess, when there's any room for a priestess mind. Turn the attention away from the uncharted terrain of the psyche, of the soul, of the transcendent. To say, fit here in this little box, give us money so that we can do this because this and this and this is in a 2,000-year-old book and we think it means this, and really it just means give us your power. Don't think for yourself. Don't feel your own feelings. Don't punch the fuckers in the nose that in the name of God rape little boys and steal their innocence just to make sure that nobody else can enter the transcendent arena. That so few priests, in the dogma of their prison, ever have a chance to touch. I can't yet look at this painting and see the glory that was taken away, that's been missing for so long. It's overwhelming to feel. So I will honor the integrity of the place that I'm at and own the grief, the pain, the fear, and the shame that I cannot look this one in the eye. And that's my work for this 30 minutes of time. A 30 minutes that I would never spend following the dictates of my cult, but which has given me something more valuable than the cultured aggression towards other men that I live out vicariously by shouting at a screen. To help one man beat another man in a meaningless game. Anything to distract myself from the landscape that has been waiting for courage, strength, and vision from a single human being all my life, and that waits for me again till I, in my weakened, cultured state, can face him again. Because he is not weak. He has held my insanity, my betrayals, my briberies, so that I could fit neatly and look nice to you and you and you and you and get paid well. He's held these wounds for a long time. He didn't sell out. He's in the darkness until I have the character to let him free. Till you have the courage to take a stand for her. The mangled feminine inside every man and woman who needs to speak through the rotten throats we poison. And let the birds fly that have been caged for too long into a heavens that we have been too frightened to embrace, to acknowledge beyond the event horizon of our reductionist, rationalist, materialistic, scientific dogma. A dogma is when we use a tool to avoid looking at the flaws in the dogma. When science refuses to be scientific about evaluating cultural intelligence. When science refuses to honor the place of the feminine as an equal partner, as the yin in relationship to the yang in any human exchange. It becomes dogma. It is no longer a tool for truth, for expansion, for goodness, but is co-opted politically to maintain the status quo. Fight, people, fight for her. The only innocent one of the bunch. The only one strong enough to carry that pain for decades. Fight for her. And you might bring some medicine into this ecology, into this body, of which you are a parasite, a cancer, or a partner, depending on the degree of ego infestation or the transcendence that bypasses these cultural structures to see something more. Fight for a little bit of dignity for your soul. Fight. Make room in the storage containers with too many papers, kept with too many records of long and winding paths going nowhere. Fight for the flames that liberate, that burn away what stops you seeing who you are.